Tell us about yourself and how you got into real estate.
I first got into real estate by walking into a bar. This took place in Los Angeles. And
Okay.
some guy walks in and we're thinking, oh, the creeper. Then we turn around. He basically was one of those real estate moguls. And he goes, well, girls, if you want to have fun and if you want some free food, you want to come and hang out at our house. So basically what it was an open house showcase of one of those like $1 million homes.
Oh,
And
okay.
he couldn't get a lot of people to come because this location was sort of on a cliff and the weather was kind of crappy. So my girlfriend and I went and we had a cup of coffee and then he offered us champagne and then he says, yeah, go just look around. By the end of the night, he came back, offered us, if you come back to every open house that I have, I'll give you $200. All you have to do is just show up, come eat my food. And we said, okay. So
Hey guys, welcome to episode 56 of the Realized Gains podcast. I'm Stephen Tran. I'm an Oregon and Washington realtor, and I invest in multifamily and single family houses.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee. I'm a mortgage lender based here in Portland, Oregon, and licensed in about 9 states. And I also invest in real estate, single family stuff, and we're actually in the process of grabbing a duplex as well.
Nice.
But yeah, so who are we interviewing today, Stephen?
Yeah, so today we interviewed Soo Yu.
Mm-hmm.
She is an agent out in the New Jersey area.
Yep.
Yeah, and she gives us kind of an overview of her past experience. I think she spent the last 20 years in property management.
Yeah, she had a really high-powered, interesting career in the sort of private equity, property management world before getting laid off, which turned out to be a major blessing for her. She moved into the real estate on the selling space and the broker side. And so she talks about her journey, and then she gives some great advice on, how to invest in real estate and how to get started.
Yeah, no, she gets really creative with it. I mean, she talked about some strategies that, we're obviously implementing now for our first time.
Lease to own strategy. And she also clarifies the difference between like condos and co-ops. Co-ops are kind of popular on the East Coast.
Yeah. So I learned something new today, so I hope you do too.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 56 of the Realized Gains podcast. I'm Stephen Tran.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee, and we're super excited to have Soo Yu here from Jersey. You want to give us a quick background and just tell us about yourself and how you got into real estate?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I first got into real estate by walking into a bar and, had a drink. I was very young and, I was just hanging out. I'm originally from California. So
You're
Bay
from
Area.
California.
My family's from Bay Area.
You were born in California, or
So I came to California when I was about 1.
when you were 1? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
First generation.
This took place in Los Angeles, and it was one of those bars by, I think maybe like near the freeway near Malibu. And
Okay.
some guy walks in and we're thinking, oh, the creeper. Then we turn around. He basically was one of those real estate moguls. And, this is like 2 decades ago, right?
Okay.
So I'm still young, I'm dumb. And I have my girlfriend who's just laughing. And he goes, whoa, girls, if you want to have fun and if you want some free food and maybe you'll get some cab feedback, you want to come and hang out at our house. And we're like, oh, this is a creeper. So basically what it was an open house showcase of one of those like $1 million homes.
Oh,
And
okay.
he couldn't get a lot of people to come because this location was sort of on a cliff and the weather was kind of crappy. So he was trying to get as many people there who would just kind of come and bubble up but be bubbly about it, right?
Uh-huh.
So we went. So my girlfriend and I went and we had a cup of coffee and then he offered us champagne and then he says, yeah, go just look around, have some food. We said, okay. So basically in his language, that was go away, leave me alone. But we were like, oh my God, this is such a beautiful place. Look at the view. And then we started talking to everybody there. By the end of the night, he came back, offered us, if you come back to every open house that I have, I'll give you $200. All you have to do is just show up, come eat my food. And we said, okay. So
And this was, you said, this was 20 years ago?
this is 20 years ago. Now I'm
Wow.
exposing my age.
No, but that's interesting. Like, yeah, I mean, we don't live in a market that really supports that, but
Yeah, I'm not giving people $200 to come to my open houses.
So
but the
let's
idea was to just get people there, so people would be like, "Oh, look at this cool spot," get the word out.
So I think what happened was he probably, so later on, this is me kind of figuring out, putting two and two together. So back then in real estate, I remember I used to hear when celebs or people who are high profile wanted to sell homes off market, they would hire models. They would hire pretty people to wait, on other people to pass out hors d'oeuvres, whatnot. He probably had some people flake on him and he needed to fill heads. That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Were you serving food though?
No, we ate them all. We literally, I think, oh my gosh. I mean, I was a starving artist. I first got into my radio
That's
and
like
TV
the
career
dream, just being
then.
paid to go party.
Yeah. And I was working 2.5 hours on a live Korean FM channel radio hosting my show. And the rest of the day, I didn't really have much to do. And obviously, with that said, not much income was being generated at all. No, I didn't know anything about investments. I didn't know anything about real estate. I was just like, free food, free food, free food. And yes.
So you were in college, or you'd finished college, or
I had just graduated,
just
and
graduated?
it was like within probably like first 2-3 years.
And did you get your degree in art, or?
I actually got it in communications art.
Oh, in communications art. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I ended up shifting my major to radio, TV, communication, and marketing. So that's kind of where my background was already. So I knew how to talk to people. I knew how to present myself. And back then, I was like 25 pounds lighter. My hair was blonde, and I had a lot of tiny black dresses everywhere. So yeah, so we had a lot of fun. I remember thinking to myself, after that first 4 weeks, so he had about 4 different showcases in 1 month. And by the time the 4th showcase was over, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. We made $1,000, And what I found out later was just by having us there would be like couples walking in, right? A beautiful like ingenue couples will walk in and they would just talk, and we'll be like their little sister, like tagging them around. Oh my God, did you see the bathroom? Oh my God, the jacuzzi is so big. And we'd be like, hop in, come on, just kind of that type of stuff. We're like, oh my God, this could be my career. I made $1,000 in 1 month. Yay, right?
Right.
I found out later on he sold that home for $6.7 million.
Jeez.
Do you want to translate the commission to everybody else on the podcast?
No, no, I'm gonna have a good time figuring it out. Yeah. So it started catching on to me a little bit. You know what I mean? After going to different properties, I started developing eyes to see what really true luxury is. And it was fascinating. I mean, we get radiant floors. You walk out of the most highest end luxury I've ever seen was like, that red infralight on top of the bathroom where you have to turn and then the minutes go. And then after you come out of the shower, you feel like, oh, it's so warm.
Yeah.
But this was like the entire house. You had the radiant floor. You walk around. There was no place that was cold. It was amazing. So that was kind of like the initial encounter of me being in real estate. Didn't go too far. Then I ended up moving to the East Coast, back to where my parents are. So by this time, my parents already had shifted, and then they settled in New Jersey.
What caused the move out to New Jersey for them?
So they moved while I was still in school. It was just my dad's business. My dad was part of this big giant corporation. He was running sectors, and
that's why he made the initial immigration as well?
Yeah, so initially there was a company called ICC back when in the 80s and 70s. He was running the Los Angeles location, and then eventually the company went out of business because of the Korean government politics and all these things happening. But my dad was one of those specialty businessman. I'm not exactly sure what he did, but he tells me, oh, I created the Nike brand. I'm like, I know you did not create the Nike brand, but I did find out he was one of those people that were there when they were developing that shoes.
Oh,
which I thought was
interesting.
pretty cool. Yeah. So his specialty is footwear. So he worked with brands like Phat Farm, Russell Simmons. I remember the really funny story is when I was in high school. Oh, actually, no, my first year of college, I went home. I was like, oh, mom, dad, I'm home. Yay. I'm like, where's dad? So imagine my dad is that 9 to 7 p.m. guy,
Mhm.
like clockwork. He comes home, he goes to work. He doesn't stray, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't wear jeans. I've never seen my dad in jeans, blue jeans. I was like, wow, what's wrong with him, right? One day, a black car stopped in front of my house, and I was looking out. Beautiful day. There's a guy walking out of this limo, and the guy is wearing jeans, and he looks like my dad with sunglasses on. I was like, whoa, who is this guy? And then he like walks really fast and he goes, hey, 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 it's me, daddy, daddy. I was like, oh, hi, daddy. I'm like, what's wrong with you? He goes, oh, I got Mr. LJ Cool J in the car. I was like, who's Mr. LJ Cool J? So at that time, he was helping to license Phat Farm.
Oh wow.
LL Cool J
Yeah.
was in the car waiting for my dad to go to Russell Simmons' house. So he comes
Amazing.
in. He's like, I got LJ Cool J. And I was like, oh my gosh, dad, you almost became cool, but so um, long story short, he wanted me to come into that business originally, but I think I wanted to be independent. So I did help him a lot,
Mhm.
did do a lot of like buyer stuff, but then eventually um, I found out some developers had properties right in the area where I was living. And they say, oh, we'll give you $100 every time you help us lease a property. I said, okay, how many are in the building? They're like 150. And I'm calculating in my head. I'm like, oh my God, this is more than 1,000 a month, right? So I go in, and basically I was doing the job of an assistant property manager, a leaser, a porter, the receptionist girl, and
Just
the
like
concierge picking
everything.
a package
Yeah.
for $100 check for every single home someone else was leasing. Yeah, that didn't work too well for me. so, so eventually I ended up getting a position with Avalon Bay, which owns at that time around 240 units throughout America, rentals. And then I learned what affordable luxury was. And that's kind of where my real estate career launched. I guess you could say that.
Wait,
Yeah.
so these are like kind of rentals that people vacation at? What is it? Sorry.
No, so Avalon Properties, kind of like Windsor Properties, or these luxury rental homes. People go in, and if you can't afford $9,000 a month, but you want a concierge and you want a nice home with washer dryer inside. They're mostly built after 2000s, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like institutional developers. They come in, they create these big, beautiful properties, and then they charge you an amenity fee of $500, $600, $700. You have the pool, you have the fitness center. So, you feel the bougie lifestyle a little bit, but without having to pay the full luxury price, because the construction itself may not be a steel metal building construction. It's mostly, wooden frames and done in the most efficient way. Yes.
I feel like they have an Avalon in San Francisco in China Basin area. So yeah, I've heard of that name before. So they're
Yeah,
pretty big. I mean, they're probably most major
Yes.
cities.
Yeah, so Avalon was at that time, I believe it was like the third largest in America as far as the rental property homes go. But then they merged with, I believe it was like Archstone or one of those companies, and then GID, which owns Windsor Properties, came in and they basically split. So they became the top two companies. GID is based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and Avalon Bay is actually out of Washington, D.C. area.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
No,
so
I'm very familiar.
yeah, so that was my first experience. I believe the property had around like 400 or 350 units, and in the office it was the property manager, assistant manager, myself, and another leaser. So literally it was almost like 80, 90 units per person, minus the property managers just don't work. They do everything else. So we're running around learning, and I think this is where I really got to study people and learning to endure, and just accepting that there's a lot of different personalities. People's needs are different, people's aim and goals are different. So I would hear some people saying, oh my gosh, I'm only going to be here for 3 to 5 years because I'm looking to buy my own place. This was their best thing to save money. And then there's others who says, why do I need to go anywhere else? If I get my credit accepted, my security deposit is $500. I move in here, I get 2 months free on a 14 months lease, and I no longer now no need to purchase, right? Because they're going to continue to do, and then they keep hopping around properties. So 10-year trajectory would happen every 3 years. They're hopping around properties. So only every 3 years they need to create the amount to put down as a security deposit, and everything else becomes their disposable income.
So people will stay in those rentals just like long term and then move to like different ones to upgrade or whatever, or just change the scenery.
Yeah. So surprisingly enough, in the beginning, when I really didn't understand that type of lifestyle, I thought that people stay for a year or two maximum, but the average report, if you look into all these different properties, and this is definitely varies between regions and type of property, but we see a lot of the 5-year plus residents.
Wow.
Yeah. In certain areas, they take over 45%.
Now I can imagine like I always mention San Francisco because I lived there and I don't think I knew many people who owned, but they would just obviously keep switching rentals.
Yep.
Obviously the rents would keep going up. We still couldn't afford anything anyways, but we still had obviously a decent amount of disposable income as, engineers, product managers, etc. Purchasing is, I know some people. I lived in my apartment for 8 years. So, it's
and
tough.
then what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll start to get mad at the leasers, the property manager, because remember, it's the corporate pushing, right? Because their excuse is tax goes up, inflation happens every year. Why would we not raise your rent? But the problem is they're pushing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% without limitation. But this guy who's working for the corporate office, who's living in the unit, may be getting a 3% merit increase barely a year.
Yeah.
So how is that okay, right? So that question comes up, and some people get very, very upset, and other people just get smarter and they say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to move to another property. Okay. And that property could be literally across the street, or sometimes they want to negotiate within the property. But people live that way. And sometimes that's the way for them to save money in a sense. Yeah. So that was kind of the start of my career. Then I ended up going to 2 or 3 different companies by getting scouted. And as I was going, I became like a middle manager, property manager, regional manager, and then got into working with the actual developers. Because working for them, even though the title on my business card might say I'm a property manager, but what they're constantly having me do is a market study where we're looking at which properties are depreciated, which multi-units. We're talking about multi-units in like 100, 200, 300, 400 units, right? And plus. So a lot of the times we would go shop them every week for a year until finally that one sign comes up where you say, okay, you know what? I think this property is having issues, deteriorating, re-merchandise, CapEx, nothing is being done. And then sometimes you go in, buy them out, and then you convert.
Oh, okay. So the model for that company was to acquire and remodel.
So a lot of the companies do, especially private companies, not necessarily those big companies that I've mentioned, but a lot of the private companies that I work for. There's a company that I work with for a very, very long time, over a decade, here and there. And they own just about 150 buildings from Brooklyn to New Jersey. They're constantly expanding. But now, as a few years ago, because of all of the COVID stuff and the non-rental payments and eviction memorandum happening, they're only purchasing properties that are under $5 million.
Interesting.
Yeah, to minimize their loss. So we are seeing many different viewpoints, and depending on if they're the A+ type of developers, if they're B, C grade, where they fit, I think their approach now is all a little bit different.
So seems like for the beginning of your career, you were kind of in the developer top end real estate world. What made you kind of push over towards like selling and becoming your own kind of business?
Yeah. So after doing that for just about 10, 15 years, maybe a little less than 15
Oh,
years.
wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So started as a leasing agent, hopped through, and then I was property manager for 4 different properties, did some developments together, 2019 came and I was laid off. And the excuse they gave me was basically, your salary is too much and investors can't afford it. I said, okay.
Working for like one of the
Private developers.
was it a private developer, not a publicly traded company? Okay.
No, not quite. But
Okay.
it is a
bigger
multi-billion, yeah. But
Yeah.
it is still a private company.
Mhm.
And it was very bitter. It was very sweet at the same time. But I have to say the withdrawal that I had to go through from having to work, it was like what, almost a lot of the portfolios that I was helping with, there was 11 different portfolios, 6,000 units, 2 phones, working 6.5 days, 3
Oh.
apartments going from different areas. And then you get the word saying, hey, we love you, but we can't afford you anymore. Here's severance. Here's this, here's that. Bye. I walked
Yes.
out and I was like, ooh, what happened? I felt like I lost half of my body part.
Yeah.
And as I was driving, I couldn't understand what was happening to me. And I think it took me a couple of hours for me to actually go pick up my daughter. And I showed up to her school. She was, I think, maybe 6th grade at that time.
Mm.
She looked at me with panic in her eyes as she came out. She goes, Mommy, you're here. What's happening? Do we have an emergency? And I said, wow, this is a reality check.
Yeah.
And I said, honey, me showing up to your school, why is that an emergency? She goes, well, you've never come to pick me up ever, right? So that's what I missed. First 6 years of her school life.
Yeah.
I thought I was there, in my mind, I was doing my best to make the ends meet, do this and that, and just make the life for her, pay for my mom, make sure that she never has to ever feel like she lacks in anything. Then I said, wow, I can't do this anymore. Right. So prioritizing. And then I think it took me about 6 months to get out of that depression, the withdrawal. That was the most, I think now that I look back, that was the biggest gift that I had. I think my brother's a pastor. So in his words, this is what he tells me. Because the environment was so great for me, right? Financially, monetary wise, amazing. Right. I would probably never make that much. I would probably never have that much. I was very grateful, but at the same time, it was so toxic. Right?
Yeah.
Every time something and I get abused and I'm about to walk away, they just throw you money. They throw you a vacation. They throw you this. It sucks you in so much to a point where I lost me as my identity. And I just became this like blur entity of whatever else somebody else puts in just gets filled and I just get it done. It was so difficult to finally say, wow, what do I want? And I looked around and I couldn't even give an answer. Like I didn't even know what I wanted to order for food. I just became that person who knew how to execute. I have a goal. I set it. I need it. That's what I was good at. I'm still very good at that, but I couldn't tell if anyone asked me what I want. I couldn't tell you. Right. So my mom and my brother came back to me and said, if you had to leave on your own, you would have never left and you would have gotten sick. You would have missed out on your daughter's life. You would have missed out on so much. God gave you a way out. I was like, okay, I'm not going to fight that. Then my brother goes, I think I told you this again for the 40th time. You should become a real estate agent. For it. I was like, no. And Steve might actually understand when I say this, but do you know why I did not want it to be a real estate agent? And it's such a petty reason too.
No, I want to hear it first.
So have you ever been to an open house where like developers or like an elaborate open house where people put out food or they have brokers open, right? Sometimes they put out a little sushi, nice bubblies and whatnot. What happens there? A lot of the realtors walk in and they come for free food. They look around and then they ask for a to-go bag and then they show up late. And sometimes they go, is there more food left? I was on the developer side. So I was seeing this for over a decade. And I said, wow, I'm never going to be one of those people.
Bunch of bottom feeders.
You don't want to be a desperate starving agent, basically.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, no, I can't. And he goes, well, try it for 6 months. If you don't like it, you can go do something else. I said, okay. Then I realized as I was going through the class, the entire 14 years of developer work, the training, the apartment leasing, violation of all the fair housing laws, because nobody gave me training in my first 3 years. I actually knew the class like inside and out. And I was like, wow, why was I not doing this? Then my attorney friend sat me down and said, hey, let me give you a little calculation. This is gonna like completely seal it. So you never want to walk away from this job. I said, what? And then the commission calculation came in.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
These are the properties you took care of. This is how much you did. And this is the number you really should have gotten paid. I said, what? It was like in the 7 digits. And I said, no way. And he goes, yes way. Because this is what you've been missing out for 14 years. I said, wow, it's insane. So I never looked back.
Okay. Can you kind of just get into just the beginning of your journey, obviously getting your license and getting started and how you got kind of ramped up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 2019, I passed, thank God, right? I got my license and I went into a brokerage that I was very familiar with. Lots of friends worked there. Then I realized, wow, the expectation from them was, wow, she's been a property manager. She's been buying and selling for developers. She knows everything. I didn't know anything. Oh, I was so embarrassed.
It's so funny. You could be an expert in real estate, but have no idea how to be a realtor.
And I was so mortified. And the reason why is, in my first week, I actually got a contract to sell a condo.
Wow.
And then the seller said, I'm going out of the country tomorrow, so you have to bring back the listing agreement by tonight. I went back to the office expecting somebody to help me. I looked around, first of all, nobody was there. Okay, this is a very large agency with like 203 locations. And I kept looking. I said, what is wrong with this picture? Then I went to the admin. I said, hey, can you help me fill this out? I just need a couple of pages. He goes, well, I don't help with any of that. You got to contact the broker. I contacted the broker. The broker ended up being in another location, like 20 something minutes down in a different office. And he said, but I'm leaving right now to go spend time with my family. Let's do this tomorrow. And basically he hung up.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, wow. But you know what? Thank God there's a thing called DocuSign, right? so that night, I contacted my seller and I begged him. I said, hey, listen, but I was so prideful. I remember I couldn't tell him this is my first deal and I cannot lose this. So I kept giving him all these things like, oh, hey, we're having a technical glitch, but I'm going to definitely get back to you. I need a broker sign off on this. And he already knew. And he said, you know what? Regardless, I decided to take a chance on you because I saw your passion. I said, okay. He goes, well, I'm going to be on that flight at this hour. So you need to get me that DocuSign by then. Otherwise, deal's off. So, of course, as soon as the office opened, I went and I didn't know anybody in the office. I grabbed a random stranger, told him I work in the same office as you. I didn't want to give us that. I said, here, I give you $100 if you teach me how to write out this contract right now. We sat down. She taught it to me. I learned it. I got the deal. I closed. Then I left that agency. And I went to where
What's the point of being there, right?
Yeah. You can have any support.
I think what it was is now that I look back, if someone offered me a position now, I would 100% go back. It's a great company for people who are seasoned. If you could be independent, if you can time manage, if you can do your thing. So I'm still really good friends with the broker,
right.
with their senior director, everybody, right? So now we come to my brokerage. So 2019, I'm all gung-ho, right? Because 2 weeks, oh my gosh, I closed the deal. It only took me 30 days. Great. I come in. then shortly after I get another deal, and in January that closes, then I'm like, why is nobody wanting to buy anything or sell anything? And then finally, when I was able to realize, oh, this is what's called the off season, COVID hit.
Oof.
2020 came. So completely out of job, completely out of everything. Then government goes, everything shut down. You can't go into anybody's home.
Did Jersey completely shut down real estate?
There was a period that's
as
correct,
well.
yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. There was a period where you weren't able to go anywhere except for going to take care of your family, or if they pull you over, you had to give one of those excuses. Otherwise, they'll physically make you go back.
Right, it wasn't considered an essential service.
No, yeah, and then it eventually changed, but that took, I think, at least 2 or 3 months.
Oh wow.
So during the time, I remember I was at the ARIA, Arizona in 2020 in January for the leadership summit, which was great. But
oh yeah.
yeah,
I was at that too.
yeah. And I had a lot of oranges. First time finding out Arizona had oranges. Who knew? I thought it was some Florida thing.
Yeah.
I met all these people. I got so pumped up. I got gung-hoed and I said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do like cross-state businesses. Ta-da! January, February, March. Now I'm sitting at home cooking, thinking which restaurant I'm going to open as soon as COVID is done. I'm like, I don't think this is working out for me. Then I realized, I said, my office, the office that I have access to, and my current office gave me a little private office from the day one. So I would go in there, just lock my door, and nobody else comes in anyways, right? We have 6,000 square feet of 2 floors. So I'm just kind of like roaming around because I don't want to go stir crazy. Have put my kid in one office, myself here, you watch this over there. She's watching Netflix. And then I realized there's one other agent on the other side of the wall. She's sitting there every day. So her and I start talking. Hey, you have any deal for me? And she tells me everything about this office. Agents, 70% of agents are all dinosaur agents, has practiced more than 17, 18 years almost. And the longest one that's been here is almost 30 years. And they have these rooted connections to the community because even until today, this office branch is the highest gross, boutique brokerages in the area. So I'm thinking, okay, so a few months go by and I go back, talk to that agent again. I said, hey, do you think the agents that are older who keep saying that I'm still scared of COVID, I can't come out, do you think they would want to co-broke, like have me use as a co-lister? So what I started doing is I started being super nice. I started calling every single one of them. Say, hey, I know I'm not saying that I'm young and you're old, but if you are scared and if you need help, if you want me to show anything, if you want to, I said, you can take the credit on record, but I'll just take the money. Let's split the commission. I'll do the footwork. I think that year, just by doing that and helping. And at some point, I think it really became a mentality of, I'm going to try to help you out too, because I'm sure they were not making any money. So I started getting phone calls saying, hey, I have a $2 million listing here. We have 5 appointments, but they will want to make sure that every single time somebody else goes in, everything is Lysol. So I said, no problem. So I bought a stack of masks, stack of gloves, put them on. I would get there. I would tell the people, do not get out of the car. I will Lysol everything. They walk in. They'll see the home with me on Google video. They'll be going around. I'll be pointing things out to them. Oh, can you zoom in? Let's take a look. There's the certification sticker, right? Then they'll come out. I'll go back in, Lysol everything. And then we'll go back into the car, put each other on a speakerphone, stare at each other, and then we would talk.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
That's how I did.
That's how you were able to do real estate when it was shut down in Jersey.
2020. Yes, that's
yeah.
correct. So 2020, that was my thing.
Yeah, all those 75% of those agents, none of them would be able to figure that out. Like, no, they don't do that with their phone. They didn't, that's too much work, it's just not their business practice.
Yeah. So I think sometimes, how some people say things like, you just end up being there at the right time at the right place.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel that something has led me there, the right time at the right place, because I am not that young, but I apparently was one of the youngest agents in the entire brokerage. And we have 40 agents. And of them, I would say 35 of them has never shown up until at least like June or July of that year. So it got me about 4 months worth of referral business. And that's how I was able to do so well starting in 2019. But then I also had to put out, notifications because I was really scared. My parents are a little older.
Yep.
My daughter was young.
Yep.
And every time, with all the unknown happening, I would come home in front of the apartment. I would literally strip.
Yep.
Put my clothes in the bag, walk in. My neighbors probably thought that I was crazy, but that's what I had to do because I was meeting random strangers in time of COVID. One thing it taught me was, I realized that I'm very prideful in certain ways. Right? I don't mind asking for help, but I don't want to beg. So, and I also want to make sure that my daughter, when she sees me, I never have to be shameful in anything that I tell her. So I always make sure that transparency and truthfulness and honesty is like number one motto. And if you want to fill that space and somehow do as well as other people who are not that way, you just have to work harder and smarter. So I think that's kind of what I learned in that year, and then my career just started going. So even until now, fast forward 2023, I have never paid for advertisements. Only thing I do is maybe like Instagram stories, and then they go, "Do you want to boost it?" And sometimes I'm like, "I think this looks good." Yes,
Right.
And my business is 100% referral.
No, I love that. That's
Nice.
amazing. No, I love what you were saying about honesty and truth. I mean, I think that's what we need to give our clients. So I mean, don't take that as a negative. That's a positive when we're honest and we give the facts to the people. So that is actually a really good trait. So
thank you. Yeah. So I think, fast forward 2 years, I had some phone calls that came in, and it started coming in from all those developers that I used to work for.
Oh,
And,
interesting. So they started noticing,
so what
and
they
you didn't
noticed,
intentionally reach out to them, or they just noticed from your
no,
social
I
media?
didn't reach out to them, but what they've been realizing is they see like my sales, they see the awards I'm getting, they see that I'm like, one of the top like 3% in Jersey. Then they started contacting me saying, "Hey, I need you to buy my son a property, but my rest of the family can't know about it." Hey, because remember how much they're tied into, right? These are the guys that are local, very large developers, that they can't even share the story of like, "Oh, I'm using this guy." Then another broker get really upset.
Right.
So they would make me sign all these NDAs. So I realized in 2021, going into 2022, I have never signed so many NDAs. For industrial commercial deals is number one, but number two is for buying for people with like developer families, extension
That's
families,
such an interesting niche.
the secondary wives,
yeah.
the other families.
very wise. That's a real one. Not even legal. No, I was kidding.
No, because there's definitely a certain percentage of that world that just wants to be totally private and doesn't want you posting that on social media. They don't want you sharing their laundry, right?
Yeah. So I think
they have to have a lot of trust.
Yeah, I think being like the AAPI, that means I'm really old, but AAPI, agent, right? Bilingual, and I'm always very quick to listen, right? Because I learned during that COVID, like that peak of COVID, right? So one client got so frustrated with me, and she basically yelled at me and she cried at the same time. I think it was a lot of her closed up emotion from all the stuff that was happening, and she just ended up venting at me, and that froze me for a minute. But basically what she was telling me is, I finally made the courage to come out because I know this is what I have to do right now, meaning purchase a home. But you're telling me what I want is wrong, and you are pushing what you want on me. She goes, and you're not respecting the fact that this was my courage, my one last courage that I had to step out of my house. It's like, how are you just stepping all over this? And she just started yelling at me. And I realized at that time, I was like, wow, she is so right. This is like people business, you know. This is, even though some things that I know better about construction, about the bone of the house or whatever it might be, some people just want what they want and they're so stuck on it, they have to have it. And in my righteousness, I would say, oh, that's wrong, you can't do that because that's so bad for you in the long run. You're gonna, but you know, I think now I realize like how to get around that a little bit. Give them the facts, be truthful, be honest, be open, but as long as they understand what they're purchasing, what they're walking into, it's their choice. That's what I always tell them. And that has somehow worked this miracle and have been a great thing for me. So yeah, I think I did grow a whole lot in 2020.
That's such an important like skill and trait, is to be able to like actually listen to criticism, you know, instead of just being like, oh, this lady's an idiot, like why is she yelling at me, like what does she know about real estate, but actually like, you know, respond to that criticism and incorporate it into your business. I think it's something it's pretty hard for a lot of people to do, and it's you know, people miss out on a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah. I'm sure you get that with your mortgage guys too, right? Sometimes.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're both investors, obviously, and we tend to push on a lot of my clients, like, you know, how do you save the most money? How do you make this the best rental ever? All this stuff. And then, you know, I personally have to realize too, it's like, oh yeah, this is an emotional decision for them. And, you know, here's the facts. I want them to understand this. But then even if it's not my favorite financial decision for them, sometimes as long as I gave them the facts, I can step back and just help guide them through, you know, the next part. And like I said, take my aspect out of it.
I love that you guys are a combo where you have a lender and you have a realtor and you guys can kind of brainstorm and pick each other's brain. My my recent investor client, a rookie investor client, came to me and she goes, I just want two things. I said, okay, tell me exactly what you want and this is what we're going to get you. She goes, I want the 10 and the 1. I was like, 10 and the 1? What are you talking about? She's like, you know, that 10 and the 1 thing. So we're sitting here over coffee. You know what I'm talking about?
1031.
So 1031 is one thing, right? So she was talking about 1031, how she wanted to do that. And I was explaining to her, the primary homes do not qualify in 1031. Then she went back and she talked to another investor friend. She came back and she said 10 and the 1. I said, oh, we went over this again. And basically what she was saying is she wants the 1% rule and she wants the 10% rule. I said, oh God. So obviously 10% rule, never put down more than 10%, buy with other people's money.
Right,
and
right,
then
right.
1% rule is basically, you know, the 1%.
The rent should be 1%.
The rent, exactly, right.
Of the value.
And I was like,
good luck hitting that.
I was like, you know, you're gonna pay like 400,000 here for a $3,300, you know, rent. I said, unfortunately, you're in middle of Fort Lee, where you're looking at New York City over GW Bridge, one of the most expensive real estate in this area. I said, how's that going to happen? So, you know, these are the things that I get a lot from my tiny investors and some other investors who really like to listen. I have a success story. I'll make it very quick. During COVID, I had a mom who came to me. She said her son was about to go to college and the dorm shut down. Then when the dorms opened up for September, she got really scared. She said, what do I do? I said, well, how's his credit? And she goes, well, you know, back when he was young, we opened up a credit card to give it to him, but we never gave it to him. And then now we realized his credit was riding on top of mom and dad's great credit. So he had 800 credit score.
Nice.
So parents gave him a little gift money and then they ended up, so we said, okay, let's buy him a condo. Let's buy him a small 2-bedroom condo. And I told him, don't tell your friends you're the owner. He's like, why? I said, well, you're going to be sharing rent and they're going to be paying your rent, putting in towards your equity. He's like, okay. Guess what happened? Almost 3.5 years later now, he's on his 3rd property.
He's on round 2, round 3. Yep.
He got his real estate license and he is now converting all of his friends into his clients and like trying to put them under his team. Absolutely amazing.
Wow. He became a managing broker.
He's trying to be. Yeah.
Super smart strategy in this market. That house hacking, like it's kind of like really one of the only ways you can make things pencil right now for first time investors that don't have money to put down.
Oh yeah, and I also have a lot of those clients who are like, oh yeah, I want the best return ever. I want to cash flow immediately. I know interest rates are 8%, but can you make this happen? And I'm like,
oh gosh.
and I think that just goes a bit with coaching. I mean, like I said, it depends on our market. You're near New York, and like I tell people about appreciation. People, let's just say a lot of people, or let's just say bigger pockets people, they have this notion that you can go make a little bit of cash flow basically anywhere. And I mean, I try to sell them on how much the appreciation is in a market. And obviously, like you don't get that money until you sell. So, whether you lose or gain value in your house doesn't really matter till later. But, there's ways to, access that, HELOCs, etc. So
speaking of like, for our listeners that are here in the Portland area, let's talk a little bit about, just really briefly, about the Jersey market. What's like entry level where you are?
So I'm in the North Jersey market. North Jersey market is very, very condensed. So the way we see it is from this point, Fort Lee to Jersey City, we call this the East Coast Gold Coast, right? So normally Gold Coast is in the West Coast. You're going to find the most condensed real estate build in this entire market. So if you are any good, if you have any ties to the society, like meaning like to the community, and if you're an actual people person, and if you want to make it, this is where. That's why we have so much concentration of real estate practitioners right in this area. So the property line here, there could be condos, there's some co-ops right here, and the condos can start, I would say, maybe like 250,000 ish. Okay. And we're talking about like a 1 bedroom.
Oh yeah, really quick, explain, because we only have like 1 or 2 co-ops in Portland. What I know it's more popular in Jersey and in
Manhattan,
Manhattan, of course. Help us understand what the difference is between a co-op and a condo.
So when you have a co-op, basically you bottom line is you don't own a real property. So co-op building is literally called a cooperation. And that means when you are given shares, it's like you're a stock shareholder, right? You're a shareholder, and then you're given
like
a
owning
lease.
A business.
Yeah. You're given a lease, and that lease is called a proprietary lease. So all the lease basically says is this is how many shares you own. This is how much right you have when we're having a meeting. If a 500 share guy says no, and you only have 2, he overrules you, right?
Right.
And then but the proprietary lease basically locks you into that unit. As long as you have those shares, that's your assigned unit that you can be there. Now, cooperation, they say legally, is the only property or only way in America you can really discriminate against other people. Because why? You have to have the interview to come in. They like to live with like-kind people. So if the co-op board says,
because it's not considered real estate, so it's not
exactly
fair housing in the same way that
it is fair housing, but
it's still considered fair housing.
It is fair housing, but the way the interview process is, because the group of shareholders will agree or disagree to accept in.
It's like
pets,
deciding to accept a partner into a law firm or
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah, kind of like that. So that's basically the basis of the co-op. Now,
see.
condo is like a townhome condo, a real property, right? Where there's an HOA, possibly, or sometimes we do come across condos that are self-managed, which means there is no HOA, homeowners association. Those could be easier. But for people who are looking for an easier life with, I don't want to take care of the roof or the structure or the outside, then.
So, but in our co-ops, can you rent out the units if you own in a co-op?
So depending on the co-op, a lot of co-ops used to not allow it. And then some co-ops make it so difficult to meet that guideline. So a lot of the co-op nowadays after COVID has eased out a little bit because people are leaving. HOA keeps going higher and higher. So in the co-op, the biggest difference is there is no separation between an HOA fee and tax. It's one fee. It's called maintenance.
Oh, interesting.
So the maintenance, right? Maintenance encumbers the tax, the board fee, the meeting fee, the concierge hiring fee, the cleaning fee, everything. And every year it goes up. So when you look at a number like maintenance fee could be like $1,400 a month, right? But then if they give you a breakdown of HOA fee of $250 for HOA and the tax is maybe $5,000, obviously you do a quick math, that should not be anywhere near $1,000 a month, right? So co-ops, our purchase price are probably like half or even lower in a lot of cases, but
because
then
of the fees.
fee.
And then What about like equity gain on a co-op
Yeah.
versus a condo?
So definitely condo. Co-op, there used to be the saying when I was growing up, people would say, oh, co-op, you buy and you got to die there. I was like, excuse me? They're like, yeah, it's so cheap to buy, but maintenance is kind of high. So if you try to sell it, no one's going to want to buy it. So
Hmm.
unless you're thinking about living there for 10, 20 years, it's not worth it. Nowadays, it has changed a little bit, but because it's so cheap and we are completely real estate-less, there's no listing, help us, right? So people are actually turning their eyes to co-ops, and a lot of these co-op boards are getting smarter. They're revamping, they're putting in amazing amenities and spacious. They're super big a lot of the time. So people would go in, and especially if your parents are not qualified to do like a senior housing, or if they can't, if they can't pay the $5,000 rent, but they have just enough to pay off that 150,000, where they can pay the 12, 13, 14, $1,500, they'll just purchase a co-op.
Got it.
Yeah. But co-op also does come with complications with like higher demands for credit. The ratio is super,
Right. Yeah.
super
Lending
strict.
guidelines are a little different for
Yeah.
co-ops
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of the lenders don't like to deal with co-ops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, is co-ops like, are they usually older buildings? Are they still building co-ops, or most things to building anything new condos mostly?
Yeah, mostly they're all building condos.
Yeah.
Co-ops usually are never really built as co-ops. I think they're built starting as an apartment. So kind of a developer strategy, right? So you buy a land, and sometimes you buy a land with environmental issues. So you go through level 1, level 2, you let it rest for a while, you build, then what happens? If you try to sell that off by sector, condo owners will eventually create a lawsuit where a developer has to pay. But what's the get around to it? If you rent it, if you create that as a rental apartment, what's going to happen is renters are going to come in, they're going to be transient, in and out, in and out, in and out. 5 to 10 years, environmental issue most likely will clear up, or they will gain that much time to clear it up. And then that's when they make a decision, depending on how much it's worth. It could convert into a co-op, or it could convert into a condo. We see a lot of co-op conversion in Manhattan. Nowadays, I haven't seen a single co-op being built from scratch as co-op. Mostly it's all condos.
And what about the single family market? What's entry level in your area?
Ooh, so I believe until last year, 2 years ago, median price was under 400. Right now, it is still a very high under 400. But in my area here, let's say Fort Lee, okay, Edgewater, Weehawken area. If you want to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-family home, a lot of people come in with a dream between like 550 and 750. I haven't seen anything that's not a knockdown, got a rebuild type of property. Probably you're looking at like something decent. You're probably looking at starting at like low 8s, high 7s, is something small but decent.
So there's a pretty big discrepancy depending on area in the city. Well, in the kind of more affordable areas of the city, what would you see for rent on like a 450, 500 type purchase 3-2?
So when you're talking about city, are you talking about Manhattan or are you talking about New Jersey?
In Jersey, yeah, sorry.
In Jersey, that's okay. So in Jersey, first of all, if you're looking at a house, single family home about 450, you're nowhere near this area. I haven't been able to find one that's, let's say, oh, actually, I lied. I did find one for my client recently who's purchasing it under VA, and purchase price was about 480.
Okay.
Now that one is it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and it's in an amazingly great school district. So literally, this is like complete luck, right?
Right.
If we were to rent something like that out and the square footage is less than 1,500 square feet, you're probably going to still get about $2,700.
Okay.
But if you were to move that home here,
right,
3-bedroom, 2-bath, and you're trying to find something that's like medium price, there's nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. And then for a $700,000 home, you're going to probably get, maybe if you're lucky, $3,500.
Right.
So I'm not the best at geography. So I mean, I'm just assuming the closer you get to Newark and Manhattan, it's just going to get higher and higher. So I'm assuming this 450, 400 price point is just like you said, like way further north away from
So it's not necessarily way further north. So the geography, the way it works is there's Hudson, there's
Yeah.
Manhattan on your side and Jersey on my side, right?
Mhm.
Along the coastline, even the homes that are maybe flood zone, because it has astonishing views of Manhattan, no matter what, they're going to be hands up, high price. So we're right on the cliff where I'm on the 8th floor looking at Manhattan skyline right now. So a condo like this, for example, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom can go somewhere in the realms of like very easily $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. And I'm not anywhere like near the water.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the properties by like larger developers, larger luxury developers that I used to hold exclusive right on the water, 2 bedrooms would start at 999, and then it would go shooting up to about 1.7 million. 3 bedrooms would start at with complete no view. We're looking at like street view of cars passing. Probably at like 1.25, and then those would go with a full view about 2.2, 2.4, depending on where you're at. If they're
Huge variance. Yeah.
Huge.
Interesting. So, I mean, clearly, like buying in this market, investing in this market is a challenge. It seems like you've been doing some creative like financing and deal structuring. How did you kind of find your way into that niche, and like what excites you about that?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, my mom was the type of person who wanted to buy a home. And my father was the type of person, very similar to me, does not want to deal with anything as far as property goes. And I realize that now because it was like, I take care of everything for everybody else outside. I want to be able to pay a rent or pay a fee where someone else just comes and does everything. I don't care, right? I can do my own savings. That was my thing. As far as creative, financing and whatnot, I'm sure you guys, I saw so many of your podcasts and there's so many geniuses that comment. I was like, this is mind blowing, right? But as far as my rudimentary, again, experience goes, I see a lot of people who do like midterm renting and then eventually transitioning over or rent to buy option, 100%. A lot of it
So lease
is
to buy, lease to own or rent to buy is
right.
pretty common in your market.
It's not common anymore because there's just no available properties. So what we normally do is I would look at their finances sometimes. And when I say I look at their finances is I would look at their tax records. So when I'm pulling a listing and if I see a list pendants on it, which means that there is a lien on it already, I try to find out if there's just first lien, second lien, how far is it pre-foreclosure, whatnot. If we happen to luck out and able to speak with the seller and find out it's just they're still within that 30-day window where they just have to make the payment, they can get out. Sometimes we go in and I've actually made offers to the sellers on behalf of my buyers to say, hey, would you consider renting it out for my clients? Right? Because they're going to get that security deposit of a month and a half.
Right.
Most likely these homes are going to be in a great school district in this area. That's and then with the advance one month, they're most likely able to pay off whatever they owe a lot of the times. And if not, sometimes my clients will also advance rent, but will edit it into the lease agreement saying at any time, if they do decide that they want to convert this as a purchase, they will go ahead and give them that credit towards the down payment.
And what will you set as the purchase price in that kind of structure? Just whatever is market value at the time, or?
Yeah, at the time of market value. So we will indicate it and then we'll basically pull comps to see, of course, what the low and the high is. And then we'll pick a mid. And then there has to be some sort of an agreement. A lot of the sellers would like to leave it as, I want to leave it as market value because I don't know how things are going to change. And, then we go into the comps and pulling and all that. And usually in this case, I very, very strongly recommend that the seller sticks with their agent. Because a lot of the times when I come in to do this type of like negotiation, they'll say, wow, you sound like you know a lot. Maybe you can be my agent too. I'm like, no, that's a bad thing to do. So yeah. So we try to make sure that there is that understanding.
I'm guessing that a lot of times you'll have to kind of educate the agent as well and help them sort of explain it to their client. Yeah. How that structure works. And I can't remember, is Jersey an attorney? Do you
it's no,
close
so
with attorney or
Jersey
you close escrow?
Yes, we know attorney review, and then we are. So they say we're not an attorney state, but in Northern Jersey we are. We practice very good.
That's
Everything
consistent.
is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In Southern Jersey, we bump heads because whenever I go down to Central or Southern Jersey, a lot of them they're like, "Why do you need an attorney? We have a title company." I'm like, yeah, yeah.
and then but for these, lease to own transactions, you're typically engaging an attorney as well, or do you kind of just have?
Yeah. Eventually, if it stays as a lease, it doesn't go as far as the attorney. But before we set it in stone, I would normally have my buyer's attorney just review the documents to make sure that there's no flaws.
Right, yeah, just for the
Mhm.
lease option and
Yeah.
whatnot. Okay.
Yeah. And then another thing that I'm seeing these days is today I was talking to, Gary Lai, right? One of our
Yeah.
chapter. Yeah. So he's a lender guy. So him and I are friends. We were talking and I said, hey, have you ever heard of like seller financing partially, but then,
Mm-hmm.
the seller can't finance the whole thing?
Right. Yeah,
And of
you can
course,
do combined with conventional financing.
yeah. And then the tenant's like, yeah, I want him to finance it, but I don't want to give you any interest. And, I'm like trying to mediate the situation. So I was having a little
Yeah.
conversation. So I think the tenants themselves have been reaching out to me. That I've been getting a lot. It's
Oh,
very
interesting.
interesting.
Oh,
I've
you mean
never
they
had
want
that
to
before.
buy what they're living
Yes,
in,
yes.
and they've been reaching out to you to help
Mhm.
kind of like
Yeah, help
negotiate
to
that
bridge
purchase and
that gap
structure it.
and
Yeah.
give them an assessment and all of that. So in the past 6 months or so, I've actually had more than a handful share of that type of inquiries coming through, which I found it very interesting. But only two has really made it, to that
Yeah.
point.
I was gonna ask because I mean that's something that scares me. Like when I think about, oh man, I gotta help negotiate for my client, partial seller finance, also partial funding.
Yeah.
That gets a little like honestly, I get so overwhelmed. I was like, I'll use another agent who knows how to do this. How do you learn the skills to do that? And how do you make it work for your clients and
So,
obviously the other person?
yeah. So I think as as cliche as it sounds, I really do believe in fairness. Because I believe that what you give, it's going to come back to bite you back. So I try to usually level with the tenants and I tell them, I said, hey, listen, you are making an offer to someone who has no interest in selling. So I think laying out that realistic expectation is number one, very important. Also, I talk about the commission upfront from get-go. Especially with what's happening right now. I tell my tenants, my clients who could eventually turn into a buyer, I tell them, hey, listen, there's a chance that the seller may not negotiate on wanting to pay the buyer's commission. Then this is what I would expect as a flat fee from you.
Mm.
Yeah. And just
and so in that
things like
circumstance, you'll just charge like a flat fee instead of like a percentage.
a fat fee.
A fat flat fee. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a lot of the times the seller will come back to me and say, okay, if I sell this and I don't pay you as a buyer agent, you could be my buying agent for the property that I will be purchasing to move out of this place or to let go of this investment. So that's another negotiation I do.
Interesting.
And you just hope that they're a good client after that.
I mean,
Yeah.
some chance is better than zero chance, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of the sellers now calling, right? Out of nowhere, listings are like up and down, and then I get a whole bunch of phone calls. That's what I was dealing with all this week. And of course, these are the sellers who had one point entertained selling, then they pulled back, then they saw the news. They're like, so I heard I don't have to pay commission anymore.
Oh, really? Interesting. So you've had a lot of interest based on that. And what has been their their verbiage? Have they been like, we want to reduce the buyer's agent commission, we'll still sell, but instead of paying X percent, we'll pay this percent or something?
So normally the initial conversation is like this. Hey, how you been? I'm good. What's going on? Oh, yeah. So about selling the property. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you can give me a little clarification. So I don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore. And that's usually the type of the tone I get. And I straight up tell them, I said, so let's talk about it. I said, tell me what you know. That's what I always ask. So instead of me throwing at them everything that I know, I always ask them, what do you know about this? Be
Mhm.
honest with me. I said, there's no right or wrong answer. And then they'll tell me some people got it right and other people completely wrong. So this is what I tell them. I tell them, yes, there was a verdict, right? But it does not mean if the seller still chooses to pay the buyer's agent, you just cannot pay the seller's agency and the split comes in. You have to negotiate directly with the buyer's agent. And then you can pay, either give the credit to the buyer and the buyer can pay them out, or you can give the buyer agent directly. That's basically what it is. Now, they asked me, why would I want to pay the buyer's agent? So this is the example I give them. If we're listing your condo for $300,000 in this market, hot market, right? And there's no buyer's agent, I'm going to put a lockbox there. I know for guarantee I'm going to get 60, 70, 80 listing requests, right? The viewing requests.
Yep.
I said, what do I do? I said, do I run over 60, 70, 80 times to show your property just with that 3% seller's agent cost? Or would you rather negotiate, right? And say you pay 1% and buyer pays the 2, or you pay 1%, buyer pays the 1 for the buyer account, and actually have someone be there dedicated to show that property as a buyer's agent.
Right.
And they're like, okay. And then sometimes worst case scenario, I give them a breakdown.
Yeah. It's like, I'll take 6% to open the door every single time.
Yeah, because I tell them, I said, if you're selling a $300,000 property, right? And then you're offering 2%, that's $6,000. Okay. And then on top of that, they're splitting with their broker. Then they're paying taxes on it. They're basically taking home like $3,500. Slightly more maybe, right?
And your dues and your fees.
Yeah, and your abuse. And then they got to be there. They got to show up for inspection. They got to do this and that. And, until the end, I said, do you really think that they're making that much? But what if they actually bring you a client who's qualified and they're going to give you an over asking offer? Or what if this is the best deal you're ever going to get, but you've missed out because there's no buyer's agent?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, can we negotiate? Sure, you can negotiate. Everything is up for negotiation. That's the type of conversation I've been having a lot.
So more of a negotiation than anything, right?
Yeah,
Which I think was ultimately the purpose of the lawsuit, right?
Yeah, it's like carrots and sticks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like, and then
I mean, it's not nationwide yet either, though. So that's the thing too.
No,
You just tell them that. It's like, I think that was just like Southern Missouri or something, and it'll be precedent for the rest of the nation at some point.
Definitely will, because I'm seeing I'm following this very deeply, and then we're seeing lawsuits coming up everywhere, almost every other day. Yeah.
And they should all pass.
Yeah. Might as well get around it. You know what? You gotta step in front of it. And that's what I feel. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Switching gears here. We at the recent ARIA conference we were at, you talked a little bit about using artificial intelligence in your business practice. What are you doing? I guess if you were to recommend to agents listening to this podcast, like maybe 1 or 2 specific tools that could help, reduce their, time spent doing a certain task, or maybe increase their productivity in one way or another, what would you recommend to folks out there?
So I think it really kind of falls back to the basic. I know everybody is aware of ChatGPT.
Right.
I am a very big proponent of Bing, so I've been pushing Bing Chat a lot. The biggest difference between ChatGPT and Bing is the fact that ChatGPT does not have the capability in giving you the actual facts, the data to back it up. Meaning,
because the data is capped at 2021, right?
Yeah. So so the version 3.5, I believe, is all capped at 2021, all across the board. But when you use the Bing chat, so Bing is like connected to the window in Microsoft and whatnot,
right?
It will physically draw out. If it gives you an answer, it will give you basically, I back it up. Here's my footnote, and then they'll give you the.
It'll do like some internet search, and give you update, and here's why. Here's the.
So one of the things that I learned from teenagers while I was actually giving an AI talk was that she's like, yeah, but then, ChatGPT. So I tried it out and I've been utilizing, and I said, wow, this is great. Also Bard, the Google version of Bard, I like Bard in certain different ways. So you have to kind of find your niche in what type of language you like.
What do you
Also
prefer?
be very, very specific in setting the tone and how you want them to do the search.
And what do you use it for the most in your business practice?
So there's a couple of things that I use it for, but mostly social media. And also I do for, I don't do so much with description anymore. I used to,
Yeah.
but I feel like when you do these descriptions,
Very
they're like,
obvious. Yeah.
right? So yeah, so I'm like, also a lot of the times, like if I have to write out a letter to my clients, follow up CRMs, things like that, I also incorporate that into like scheduling it as well. So, another thing that I really, really promote is Canva. I know it's so played out. Everybody goes, Canva. But, actually, if you know how to utilize Canva, Canva works wonders for you. Canva could delete out the guy next to you in the photo, all in the same frame. Canva could physically help you write out whatever you've wrote. It could rewrite it for you. It could make it more fun. It could make it more dull. I mean, it has so much capability. But the best thing that I love about it is like for Aria, so I'm part of Boston as well as New Jersey.
Oh.
So I'm Boston committee member, and I do gala and things like that there.
Yeah.
And for New Jersey, I'm the chapter president. So when we're overseeing social media, a lot of the times there's a lot of events that happen. Right? So sometimes I know certain things have to go out at a certain time, but how do you constantly keep track of that without really paying all these different entities? Canva.
Right.
You can link it with MailChimp. You can link it with any of your social media, and then you can schedule it. So you just basically, like, how the commercial goes, set it and forget it. Yeah, that's literally what I do. It's been cutting and saving so much of my time. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like last night, I sent out this flyer through Eventbrite, and I did some through like MailChimps and some through social media, Facebook and Instagram for Northern New Jersey, one of the local realtor board stuff coming up. But we're collabing with 4 different ARIA boards, but I needed this to be strategically sent out at 3 a.m. because it takes a certain time and the algorithm's going to pick up. And by the time people wake up, the first thing they open, this is going to pop up, right? So I was like, okay. I was like, should I stay up until 3 o'clock? I'm like, duh, Canva. So I go in, I link it, and I set the time, done.
I had no idea that you could do that through Canva.
No, I just use it for designs.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
Amazing. It's amazing. I hope this is a good takeaway for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've got your day to get on with it, and we'd love to keep picking your brain, but to kind of wrap things up, if you were to recommend to somebody that was like interested in, getting started in real estate investing, or even just like, buying their first home, or, that type of thing, what would you recommend to somebody in this market?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I've actually just done this to a couple of my people, and I got to thank you so I could now share this. So I had a couple who was looking only in a really great school district, right? They're prepping for 7 years ahead because they're just now pregnant, and they're like, oh my God, we need a really good kindergarten. I was like, okay, sometimes I think as an investor, you have to see beyond your immediate need or what you think you need, because maybe that is not it. If you look at the timeline of how long a person keeps a property in America, what is it? Like average is like 7-8 years, maybe
7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a big turnover, actually, believe it or not, right around 3 to 5 years as well. So, but that also brings up a good topic, because if you buy a 2 or 3 family multi in an area, maybe not the best school district, but if your price point is right and use the FHA, put down very little, then the second home after 2 years, because you will still qualify again as a first-time home buyer, and you can do a 5% down or whatnot, and then you move up big. And then the tertiary home could be your single family house where you're upgrading formally. Now you're in 5-6 units as your investment, and then you have your primary as well. So this is something that I advised to someone very vaguely when I didn't really know the real estate market too well. And as I was studying, and I was like, oh my God, you're my real study case that actually
that actually did that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So now she's basically having her uncle, having her dad do the same thing. And both of them are on their second properties.
Nice. Yeah, that's super great advice. It actually, when we bought our home, our first home, kind of the same thing. Like we weren't even thinking about school. I mean, unintentionally, we weren't thinking about school district. We were just like, what can we afford that's not that I don't need to fix up because we don't have the skills to do that. And we found something. And then when our kid was in first grade or whatever, kindergarten, we made our move up purchase, and it like, cause we were like, God, like, damn, I wish I would have like thought about the school district, but instead, we took a home equity line of credit, and we rented out that home, which is a rental, which wasn't in maybe the most ideal school district, but it allowed us to be able to buy the home in the school district we wanted to. So yeah, if you're thinking about that intentionally, that's definitely great advice.
Yeah. And then for those who have younger kids, if you're a parent and if you know that you have decent credit or good credit rather, right? And if you know that you have a credit card, at least one card that you've never been late on the payment, very cautiously, I say this, by the time your child is maybe about 8, okay, put their social on top as on your card as an additional user, cut up the card. Don't ever tell them you have the secondary card.
Yeah.
Let them ride your credit out for 8 years. And as long as your credit is in a good standing, they will ride with you. And by the time they hit 18, their credit score is going to be at the 800 level too.
Yeah.
Now that,
I was gonna say, you gotta be careful that make sure you're good financially.
You have to be very good financially. Yeah.
So I've definitely heard stories of people dragging their kids' credit.
Oh yeah. We've seen
my
that
parents
too.
did that for me, and I had no idea. They never told me, I had no idea, and I was very glad that they did that.
Yeah. And then, a little bit of gift letter, and a little bit of funding, and they can have their first property by the time they get to college. And again, do the same thing that I recommended my other client to do. And because this is a real live scenario and it's been so successful. We've been doing it to a lot of other parents. So I take parents that may be looking into like school districts in Boston from Jersey, because it's only 4-hour drive, and they'll go. It's expensive, right? So it's called the like Alston lifestyle or whatever. All these kids go to like BU, and then you get a 2-bedroom, and then eventually like 4 people end up living there together.
Right.
But everyone else is pouring in your equity. And the most important thing is how to keep a gag order of making sure that you never expose to your friends that you are the actual owner. And because that is so important, that's boundary, right? This is where the personal and the business, and I think it's a really good lesson for the child to learn as well. And then once they start to see that their equity is growing, and then eventually, if they understand that this is what becomes the base of building that generational wealth, it's not just about building, it's about maintaining and then fortifying it. So I think that's something, that I really enjoy teaching people.
No, I really like the idea of obviously having that gag order, like, because I feel like, obviously roommates move in, is like, oh, your parents bought you a house. Like,
Yeah. Then all of a sudden they're late on payments and they stop paying. And
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And Sue, if people are looking to get a hold of you or find you on social media or just email you, how could they get a hold of you?
So all my social media and all my email, everything is the same. My website, sellwithsoo. Sue is spelled with SOO. So you can either hashtag or @. My handle is sellwithsoo, SOOYU, Soo Yu. If you forget, I might sue you. So, I
That's
won't
funny.
sue you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with with everyone. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.